The Godfather. A lot of people probably know this as the Francis Ford Coppola film starring Marlon Brando as the titular character. However, a lot of people may not know that it was actually a book first, as you can see on the back here. Soon to be a major motion picture from Paramount. Probably the first controversy I want to get out of the way. The author's name. I say Mario. I've heard others say Mario. So, as I keep referring to the author throughout this review, just keep that in mind. If that's something that's triggering, just be warned this review is going to be a little salty. So with that disclaimer out of the way, let's get into the book itself. So the very beginning starts off with 3 very short stories. The first one is about an Italian undertaker whose daughter had just been violated. Due to their connections with the judge, as well as a lot of money, the perpetrators of the crime were let go. And not being satisfied with the legal system, this guy says he will go to the Godfather. The second story is about a baker. One of his best workers, Italian, who's being threatened to be deported now that World War II is over. And this is very much to the dismay of both the baker and his daughter. Not a very pretty girl by any stretch of the imagination, but they have a connection. Unable to find legal means of keeping him here, he decides to go to the Godfather. The third story is about a washed-up singer who just can't seem to put down the alcohol bottle. After a light love tap with his mistress, he realizes that he just can't do it anymore, and he has to talk to the Godfather. So all throughout this, there's quite a build-up to who the Godfather is and how in the world can he make all these situations turn out better in the end. He introduced the character as his daughter is getting married. This man is a Sicilian, and according to tradition, anybody that asks a favor of the father of the bride cannot be refused. So, obviously there's a lot of people wanting the Godfather to pull some strings for them. As we've got from these first 3 stories, we can tell that he is a very powerful man. But probably the thing I find the most brilliant about this wedding setup is that it is a very fun way to introduce all of the major characters throughout this story. We have his right-hand man of Tom Hagen. Maybe that's not how you pronounce it, but that's how I read it. You also have the rest of his family. You got Santino, who's the oldest son, Frankie, who's the second oldest, and then you have Michael, the youngest. Santino, being the oldest, is the next in line to the Empire, while Michael, a lot of people consider him to be the true heir to the Godfather. However, he's too straight-laced of a kid. He went to an Ivy League college, and he also fought in World War II to protect the country. Now during the wedding, all 3 of these characters show up. And here we realize what the Godfather wants in exchange for all these favors. So we start with the baker. The main thing is he's been sending the Godfather specially made rolls at least once a month as a way of saying thank you, and also as a way of being able to cash in some great favors in the future, which the Godfather, with all his legal connections, is able to take care of his little baker's soon-to-be son-in-law, so everything will be all set. He also makes a note that because the war is over, there is bound to be several other Italian people that could very well be deported. As for the Undertaker, he hasn't really done much of a thing, in all honesty. He just shows up, assumes that the Godfather will be able to do good things for him. The Godfather is very disturbed by this. The main way you pay off the Godfather is you gotta do things for him. Either you gotta do an unpleasant job to help his place in the underworld, or you send him things. Like there's some families that send him a nice bottle of wine, the baker sends nice bread, and some even send money, or even just thank you cards. Something to acknowledge that the Godfather is a very important person. He begrudgingly agrees to be able to even out this Undertaker's demands, but unlike the baker, he's not really in that big of a hurry to solve this one. Then we go to the washed-up singer. His name is Johnny Fontaine. He was one of the biggest record labels at the time. However, he is slowly losing his voice, which was kind of showing when he did a few numbers with his best friend at the wedding, as well as in the presence of the Godfather. Now, Johnny is held in very high esteem to the Godfather as, well, he actually is Fontaine's godfather. Everybody else calls him that as a means of adoration. Because in Italian, they say life is so difficult that you need two fathers to live with it for. You got the first one, which you're given, and then you have your godfather. And so everybody calling him Godfather is a term of endearment. So now that the singing career's kind of dried up, Johnny was very much hoping that he could get into the movie business. However, the producer, because he screwed his girlfriend, isn't going to have him be the star that could easily make him several millions of dollars. Johnny is a little hesitant that the Godfather's power can reach out on the West Coast, as his domain is mostly on the East Coast. But he utters the most famous words: "I'll make him an offer he can't refuse." This is all well and good for Tom Hagen. While he is the right-hand man now, he's really more of a substitute, as the actual right-hand man is in the hospital slowly dying of cancer. As a way to pay respect, the family all goes to see the original right-hand man at the hospital, and it's very obvious he's on his deathbed. And he pleads with the Godfather that, "You must do me this one favor. You are a man of great respect, of great power. You are the one that can get rid of death to make me live." But unfortunately, this is something that the Godfather has no power over. But he's able to console his friend in his last few minutes of life. From there, Tom Hagen is given the full title of the right-hand man. However, Johnny's situation will prove a good testing ground to see how well this guy will do. So, the Godfather sends him out there to talk to the producer. And he had very much been studying under the Godfather's teachings. It's not so much about getting angry or throwing threats. It's all about being calm and collected the whole time, while the other guy is getting angry. Because while the other guy is angry, he loses his logic. But if you remain calm, you understand everything that's going on. And it seems like everything's going all right. In fact, he even invites Tom up to his stud farm. So for those of you that don't know, a stud farm is basically a place where people raise as well as breed champion horses, usually for the idea of racing. Well, he even shows Tom Hagen his pride of the line. And I should probably say right now that there's a reason that this was made into an R-rated movie, because, wow, this book is very graphic. In fact, I still find it kind of crazy that as the producer is showing Tom his prized horse, the main thing he's talking about is his genitals and wishing he had something that magnificent. So they end their meeting with dinner when they start getting down to business. The producer just simply brushes off Hagen, basically saying, "You can't strong-arm me. I know that your godfather is some sort of mafioso. You can't do this kind of stuff to me." And so, Tom, realizing that he wasn't getting anywhere, simply leaves. The next morning is where we get to another iconic scene from the movie. The producer wakes up the next day to just find that there is just this trail of blood slowly leading up to his bed. He undoes the sheets to find that it is the head of his great horse that he bought so much money to try to raise. Which, I'm not gonna lie, I was a little disappointed, because when I saw how much the producer was talking about this horse's genitals, I kind of thought that's what was gonna be in the bed. But I guess the horse head is definitely a lot more of a direct approach. Like, yes, we know where you are. You are no longer safe. Even with all of your security guards, we are able to sneak inside, butcher your horse, and then show you the fruits of our labor. So needless to say, the producer begrudgingly gives the part to Johnny Fontaine, because obviously he fears his connections with the Godfather and wonders what in the world could happen next. Tom is successful in his mission, and he flies back to Long Beach to meet up with the Godfather. Once back, we see Santino, or Sonny as everybody calls him, learning the ropes of what it is like to be a godfather. Along the way, there are a lot of other members of the criminal underground that will ask for money or maybe even a little bit of favor from the police to be able to keep up some underground activities. There is one such leader, which everybody nicknames the Turk, due to his darker skin giving him a more Middle Eastern complexion, as well as his ruthlessness. He goes to the Godfather to say that he wants to start a string of narcotics. Now, the Godfather, even though he is in a very shady business, he still has morals. He's fine with gambling and prostitution because these are things that any lawmaker can look the other way on, as this is something they like. But the idea of illegal drugs is something that doesn't sit right with him, and he knows that his legal contacts in Washington will not stand for it either. He says he will pass on the deal. However, Sonny says he is interested. This mistake proves to be one of the worst things that Sonny could have done. The Turk realizes that now there is a struggle between the family, and that is something that can be manipulated. But the Turk realizes that he can take this a step further. The Godfather, or Don Corleone if you prefer, is out doing some Christmas shopping with Freddy driving the Don around. While out in the street, Turk sends a hitman after him and shoots him. In the confusion, the Turk also takes Tom Hagen captive. This is a way of the Turk to be able to force this deal onto the Corleones. Now that the one who disagreed is gone, the one that agreed is now in charge. However, it doesn't really go that easily, as the Don wasn't actually killed, but rather he is just in the hospital slowly recovering from his wounds. Santino, being the hothead he is out for blood. He wants his revenge on the Turk any way that he can get it. But unfortunately, there isn't a single target that he can point the gun at. So while all this is happening, Michael hears the news. The main thing I should have noted before is that Michael is intended to be engaged to an American girl known as Kay Adams. She is the one that us as the reader can attach to. Unless you're somebody from the criminal underworld, you probably don't know a whole lot of its inner workings. So Kay is the one that was at the party asking the questions about how this organization works and who all these tough-looking characters are. And so, we learn a lot from her. She is just as straight-laced as Michael is. Being the daughter of a preacher, that's something that comes to be acquired, I guess. So when Michael hears the news, he drives right down to the Godfather's house in Long Beach to try to figure out what is going on. Michael wants to know what exactly is the situation at the hospital. And Santino assures Michael that everything is perfectly fine. They have a whole bunch of guards being able to take care of the Godfather's room, as well as to cover the entrance. But Michael senses that something is wrong. He decides to head down there anyway to be sure that that is the case. When he gets there, though, he finds out that there was a police captain, McCluskey by name, who asked that everybody be cleared out of the Don's room. This is leaving the Don wide open. While down there, Michael is fortunate to run into the baker's assistant, and with both of their help, they're able to relocate Don Corleone to a different room just before another assassination attempt goes off. However, the police captain hears about this, and he is not happy about it, especially when Michael insinuates that he's taking pay from the Turk, and so he busts him in the jaw real good. So much that it required him to have a bit of a cage to hold everything in place, and he was in the hospital for another day or two after that. But luckily, the job is done, and the Don is safe. There's a lot that's going back and forth. It seems like each side is gaining major victories. One of the biggest ones is that the Don's most ruthless enforcer, Luca Brasi, he tries to negotiate terms with the Turk. However, he ends up being killed instead. And the main reason the family knows this is that Luca always went out wearing a bulletproof vest. They receive a package from the Turk with that same bulletproof vest, and inside is a dead fish. And this is a sign to all the hardcore Italians out there that Luca Brasi is sleeping with the fishes. However, the other major victory is to the Corleone side, where they find out that there was actually a double agent working on the inside. One of the other toughs is able to dispose of him, and that is where we get the more famous scene from the movie of "Leave the gun, take the cannoli." However, that's not actually how it happens in the book. Most people know that that line was improvised. Essentially what happened is, so the tough was driving to a more deserted part of town when he got an assistant assassin in the back seat. However, he's hiding, so the double agent didn't know about it. A common thing that this guy had to do because of his old bladder, he would have to stop and then go take a leak. Now, it seems like in the movie it was portrayed more the idea that, like, while the guy was taking a leak, that's when the guy in the back popped up and shot the double agent. But in the book it was a little different. So the tough takes the leak, he comes back, and then he motions to the guy in the back seat, now. And that is where the few shots are taken care of. They dispose of the gun, and the guy is given a year-long vacation in Miami just to make sure that the police can't catch on to it. But at the same time, they want the Turk to know that they took care of this double agent. It gets to a point where the Turk wants to negotiate terms, as both sides are taking some very heavy losses from this. And so there is a meeting set up. The Turk is going to show up, the aforementioned police captain, McCluskey. This is a bit of an insurance policy to make sure that whoever the Corleones send won't attempt to take a shot at the Turk. Because if they kill a captain, that is going to be some very bad press for the Corleone family. However, that is just what they end up doing. The plan is that Michael would be sent. Because he is so straight-laced, part of the Ivy League, nobody would suspect that he would be the one pulling the trigger. And on top of that, to be at a neutral location during a non-busy hour, and a gun could be easily sneaked to him, but it has a special tape on it, so there's going to be no fingerprints found on the gun. And while all this is happening, the Corleone family owns a newspaper, and as such, they're going to start spreading word several weeks before this meeting that McCluskey was indeed a very dirty cop. And so the idea of him being killed wouldn't be as devastating to the force. So, Michael goes to the meeting, and the plan goes off perfectly. However, Michael has to skip town, and he is sent over to Sicily, where he would stay there for another 2 years. Now, that is the end of part 1. There is actually 8 parts of this book. Part 2 I find rather strange, so as you can see, it's been a pretty flowing narrative so far. But part 2 dedicate to Fontaine's movie career, which after his famous movie has really started to come back up. And in fact, Dom was able to supply funding so he could then become a very famous director. However, he was only ever able to give enough money to direct the one film before he got shot. Along the way, he also wants to try to break a little bit back into the record business. He wants to sing with his best friend, who, just like Fontaine, drinks like a fish. However, he has still got a set of pipes on him, and both of them end up putting out a record deal. And as a way to give tribute to the Godfather himself, this record is mostly full of old Italian songs, such that he would remember when he came over to this country. Now, part 3. From my understanding, the second movie delves a lot into the origin of how the Don rose to power. Well, that is actually described in the book, which I was very surprised by. So the main thing you need to know is that from a very young age, the Don knew that he could not lose his temper. That's what his dad did to a local mafioso in Sicily, and that's what ended up having him killed, as well as any of his other relatives. Luckily, he was able to get to America before they could figure out that there was one that actually got away. There, he was just a simple Sicilian trying his best to make ends meet. However, he had one skill that was invaluable. He had a driver's license. Back in 1908, there were not a whole lot of trucks on the road, and that is where he got a taste of the criminal underworld. There were some people that wanted him to run an exclusive load, and they paid a lot better than his standard job at the grocery store. So he went for it. And through a series of connections, he was able to slowly build up his team to how it's described in the first part of the book. But there was one thing that stood in the Don's way, and that was another criminal leader that went to all the local businesses and asked that he get paid a certain amount. Otherwise, something bad might happen to their business. However, the Don is able to see through his thin disguise real quickly. While there was always rumors that he knew somebody in Washington or that he had a team of assassins with him, that was not the case at all. The Don was able to kill him, and there was no retaliation whatsoever. But enough about the Don's origin story. We go back to Michael Corleone living out his life in Sicily. It's a very simple life, and a very boring one at that, as he's not able to go very far. He is always followed by 2 guards at all time. While the scenery was nice, and his jaw never properly healing has caused a lot of problems, he seemed to be doing just fine there. But he really wanted to go home, and a lot of people would ask, why did he not get the jaw fixed? And he said it was the one thing that reminded him of home. However, he was also living with a doctor that wasn't really known as the best around there, so it could be that as well. There was one thing really interesting that did happen. He was hit by what was known as the lightning bolt. Basically the idea of love at first sight. He saw this simple maid out tending a field, and he just had to have her. Through some persuasion, he is able to do just that, and he enjoys married life just fine, completely forgetting Kay in the process. However, this life didn't last for too long, as they were both about to go for a drive. When she started the car, all of a sudden Michael noticed that one of his 2 guards started running away. Michael tries to shout, but unfortunately it's too late. She starts the car, and it just explodes. It was about a week before Michael was able to gain consciousness, and obviously, Mrs. Michael Corleone didn't make it. We go back to the States. Remember how we introduced the Godfather through his daughter's wedding? Well, marriage life is not treating her very well. Her husband, Carlo Rizzi, enjoys dominating her every time he gets the chance. She has tried talking to the Godfather as well as her mother about this. However, neither of them are really sympathetic. The idea that she's being brutally beaten by the husband means that she must be doing something wrong. However, Santino can't stand for this. And during one such beating where he got a chance to actually see her face, he then went to her husband's place and just started wailing on him something fierce. If he was armed, he would have been killed, but because he was standing there whimpering, Santino likes to fight for a little bit of honor and let him live, but not without having a lot of bruises and scars to show for it. Now, you'd think that'd be the end of it, but unfortunately, Carlo kept thinking that Santino was a wimp for not finishing the job, and so he then starts wailing on Connie again, to which Santino has just had enough. He is going to drive out there, which is very dangerous because now he is the acting Godfather, but he also takes a few troops along with him just to be sure. And it turns out this was all a setup. As Santino is going to confront Carlo once again, he is gunned down by a rival family. While the Turk was taken care of, they lost a lot of favor to another crime family because the Turk was working under their forces and also wanted to peddle these drugs as well. It is this family that gave the order to assassinate Santino. And this is where the Undertaker had to cash in his favor. Santino is brought into the funeral home, and the main thing the Godfather says is his mother cannot see him like this. You need to dress him up. You need to make him look good. And so, he does the deed. Now at this point, the Don is pretty much up to full health again. And while he is doing this, he is trying to figure out how to get Michael back into his life. Freddy basically went into shock after the Don got shot. Santino is dead, and now Michael is gone. He wants to have his family back again, and Michael is basically the only one left. However, as fate would have it, there was a neutral family. A member wanted to break away from the family. However, through a lot of misdeeds as well as just trying to make a life for himself, he ultimately ends up putting the price of death on his head from several different people. With the permission of the family, the Don is able to pin McCluskey's murder onto this guy that was going to die anyway. But even better than that is that the Don would reassure that anybody in the family would be substantially compensated for this great reward. And so, Michael is brought home. After years apart, Kay is understandably very ticked off that Michael did not write to her. However, at the house, they are able to reconnect once again. And Michael explained to her that he could not write to her because such a thing would have put a target on his back. Which, it got pretty close when his wife ended up taking the car bomb. So with that, they're able to reconnect. But there's a lot to do. The Don then starts up a master negotiation. He brings in all the crime families from all over the country into one location and to be able to hammer out some sort of agreement to make sure that what happened to his dear Sonny would never happen to any other crime family ever again. The negotiation lasts a while, but they are all able to reach an understanding. Michael is slowly starting to be trained to be able to take over the family business. While Freddy is fine, he is over out in Vegas trying to scope out where their next slice of territory would be. And while doing this, we find out that he's got quite a taste for women, such that the Don has lost complete favor in him, as that's something that could easily be used as leverage against him. So Michael is the one taking the reins. The Don teaches him everything he knows, before unfortunately dying in his garden shortly after he steps down as the Godfather. With Michael in charge, the first thing he does is try to clean things up a little bit. And the first thing was killing Connie's husband. So remember how Santino was gunned down? The entire family reasons that it was a setup, that he started beating on Connie again, because he knew that Santino would be coming by. He'd be taking this specific bridge, and that is what led to his death. So, Connie's husband is executed, and the family starts slowly moving out to Vegas. All the while, Kay has finally tied the knot with Michael, which, while this is Michael's second time, for Kay, this is the first time. A rather hard marriage, as obviously Michael cannot talk about his line of work. He can give some basics, but she can't ask a lot of questions for her own protection. And out there in Vegas, the family makes a name for itself again, and that is where the book ends. Well, there's honestly a lot more to discuss here. I mean, it's a relatively thick book. It has a lot of characters spanning several years, and there's just a lot of questions that are answered. For instance, how in the world Luca Brasi became the Godfather's most brutal enforcer. I can tell you, that was probably the story that most disturbed me the most. If you read it, you know exactly what I'm talking about. But for everybody else, I'll just leave that as an incentive for you to read the book on your own. But generally though, I really enjoyed it. It's pretty amazing how the story can have so much going on, as well as so many characters, but yet it doesn't feel bogged down or boring. Much like, I know I say it so many times, but Frank Herbert's Dune. Now that's a book that's very encompassing, has a very vivid setting, very vivid characters, and a lot of things. But that book is absolutely boring to me. This one, I found very engaging. Mario reminds me a lot of the author of Madame Bovary. Now, the main reason I say that, so Gustave Flaubert, his main claim to fame was he took Write What You Know to a whole nother level. Whatever he wanted to write about, he would study thoroughly before he would write anything down in the book. And in all honesty, it very much feels the same way with Mario here. I'm not sure if he was ever involved with the underground crime world, but he speaks with such authority that even if he wasn't, I would wager he must have had somebody in his life he was able to get all this information from. In general, it's a good book, but just know that it does not hold any punches. I mean, even in a literal sense, as well as just the graphic details of death. I mean, I've read as well as seen other medias where, say, a character dies and they're just laying there, but Mario even throws in the idea that after a person dies, basically they lose all sense of their bladder, and obviously the corpse stinks. And it's just kind of crazy that he went into such detail, but yeah, he did. Now, that is The Godfather. So, going from one groundbreaking book that made a groundbreaking movie into another groundbreaking book that made another groundbreaking movie. I gotta tell you right now that this is a lot bigger, and I'm on page like 75, and wow, is this ever dry. I'll see if I can actually finish the whole thing. I mean, I figure much like the movie, the beginning's a little slow, but once you get into the middle and the end, it really starts to pick up. So I hope that's the case. But I guess if worst comes to worst, I'll just give a partial review if I just can't get too much further. Either way, I hope you will join me then. Till next time, keep having fun.